In this video, I'm going to use the grid I made with the paper clips, and we've got these little scratchy imperfections. I'm not really going to worry about that. You can always consider anything, especially on just a piece of paper, as practice, as something that you're building skills on. So even if you were doing this as a final piece on top of layers of paper and paint and ink, those would just blend in the background. Or if you were wanting to do something that was a little cleaner and more quote perfect at the end, you could just consider the grids here practice and move on and try to do them again at another time. But here I'm just going to use this grid as a way to show you how to build mandalas. And we've already talked about how to take notes, keep it loose, consider shapes of the alphabet, geometric shapes, etc. as a part of your mandala building vocabulary. So this is just an example of a way to build any kind of mandala. You don't have to stick with a particular theme, just whatever happens. You can keep your notes, your sketches next to you, or your chart of shapes. And here I'm just dividing that main circle, first into quarters, and then drawing lines at the 45-degree angles. And you can do anything from this point. Sometimes people do this in pencil as a way to create a guideline, and then later they'll come in and erase the pencil lines. It would be very hard for you to see pencil lines on the video, so I'm just going to incorporate it for now. But I'm going to go for a long, narrow petal shape here. So the first one I made it smaller, and then started to do longer ones on the other ones, and that's no tragedy because you can just go in and do the longer one on the initial one and then come back in the other spaces and do the shorter one, because you can always fill it out or fill it in. I actually have a really funny story where somebody found my sketchbook. I left it on the top of my car and drove off, and it ended up in the street, and somebody rescued it for me, and he happened to be an artist too, and he was looking through it and he said, "Wow, how do you get these mandalas to be so symmetrical?" And I was really surprised because I really didn't think that they were symmetrical, but it just goes to show you that often we are way more critical, and our eye sees a lot of imperfection where it just may kind of all fill in for an overall picture for somebody else. I'm doing the same long petal shape here on every other piece. These 45-degree angles. And then I'll do scallops. And that's about the range where my hand feels comfortable. You can see it starts to distend here. So I'm going to turn it so it doesn't get quite so distorted. Even if I decided to make this piece a final art piece, I could fill it in with marker or paint or whatever, and still, even if I didn't do a multi-layered mixed media piece, all of these little random scratches and imperfections, they could totally be incorporated, painted over, drawn over with marker. So just consider whatever you're doing part of the process. So here we're coming to the end, so you kind of estimate. Here's my center. Do a little dot or something. You can just visually estimate the center point. And then you end up with something that is more or less the same size as the other pieces. And then I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that, but make it a little longer, a little taller, still a scallop, still something petal shaped. And then because it's longer, you're probably going to turn the paper a little bit more, or your canvas or journal or whatever it is you are working on. And here I'm adding open circles all the way around. And of course, this is just an example. You could do anything. You could do a little dash. You could do another scallop. You can always repeat what you've done before. Something I didn't show before, but is totally an option. And I may go in and do another video to show you how to do this, but you can add, you can do circles by tracing around objects like lids or paint bottles or anything round, anything whatsoever, a bowl, a plate, a cup. Use those as your guidelines. So here I can start to build in. And I say can because it's an option, it's not a requirement. It's more or less just how I feel like going at the time. And you can consider your mandala drawings as something that possibly leads to a finished product eventually. Consider it practice as long as you can, just so that you stay loose, and practice self-compassion, and don't try to make anything too perfect, because then you get too far into the left brain that tries to analyze too much, and can serve you very, very well in a lot of parts of your life. But as with anything, if you go too far there and then start to get critical and try to think of the exact right way to do something, then it just starts to limit you at some point. And so here, you just estimate and see that you're going to end up in the middle pretty much there. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat what I did here, but then we're building in. So I'm going to do these circles really quickly so that we can move on to something different, because I think you probably get the point about this design. And you can see with that one it got smaller and more filled in, and it's okay. It doesn't matter if it ends up being a little different than the rest. And then here I'm going to go with a shape that I'll repeat. And I'm going to go to the corners, the quarter points. So these will match up vertically and it'll match up horizontally here. And you estimate the size of it. But I will not agonize over making it exactly the same. Just eyeball the point where they meet up across. So we have our 4 directions, north, south, east, west, and then you go at the 45-degree angles. This is one way to do it. You could just also do your hearts or stars or circles or whatever you're doing all the way around, just like we did with the scallops and the circles, where we didn't try to meet up at those points. So we're just going midway between there, and I'm not going to do any measurements or stress about where the exact 45-degree point is. Just estimate. And then you can also go halfway in between those points to fill it out. We're running close to being to the end point of this video, just because we don't want to make them too long. And you can always leave it where it is and come back to it later and fill in, add more details, or leave it where you are and fill in with color, with anything, marker, crayon, watercolors. So you could leave it there and be perfectly happy. I know I would. And I'm going to go ahead and stop it here and move on to our next video.